Hey everybody, welcome back to another Midweek with a Maker. It's been a while, but we're going to pretend like that never happened, and we're going to continue with the Wrought Iron clad 1075 build that we've been doing. So you can see the wrought iron's coming through nice and clear. 1075 is dark, and that wrought just kind of grayed out. It's got a little bit of oxidizing, which is cool because then it gets that red in there. We've got brass for the guard, and then a little bit of antler and spalted birch for the handle. So the handle is a little thick, but I don't want to thin it out anymore. I like it being kind of thick. So what I need to do now is start working on the sheath for this guy, which is going to end up having to have a lock because it's going to want to pop out. So if it sits in the sheath, it's going to want to cant out because of how thick it is on the guard. But my personal style, I like, well, having blacksmith hands, having bigger hands, I like to be able to have a grip that's nice to hold on to. So what we're going to do is we're going to start laying out what that sheath is going to look like. So we'll set the camera down, and hopefully it's in a way that we can see. There's the knife. And of course, I had a piece of paper that I wanted to use, and it has disappeared out on me. I recently had a former student contact me and say, hey, I'm doing a report for my high school class on my passion for, he said, blacksmithing. I try and correct everyone and say, no, it's called forging. A blacksmith forges, you know. And he's like, what are essential tools? And I responded to him and I said, well, probably the most important tool is going to be a pencil and a piece of paper. I'm a big believer in making sure that your work, you draw it out first, so when you're doing a custom build, your customer knows exactly what you're making and exactly what they're going to get. Having said that, this build, and really most of the Midweek with a Maker builds, have been what I would call freeform. So those don't have the drawings. These are allowing for a little bit of magic and a little exploration, which is okay too, as long as it's not the only thing that is done. So I'm trying to control my excitement there. So I'm starting off, I just want to trace this knife. And instead of, in this area, the ricasso, which is not center screen, the ricasso, I'm going to run that one straight up because that's how I want that blade to fit in there. And I tried to go a little bit on that line. At this point, I'm going to add material, and I'm going to follow that line using the gridded paper. I know that I'm adding 1/4 inch, which is awesome, especially if you're somewhat lacking on your drawing ability. Having gridded paper is really nice because it allows you to know what you're doing, or it gives you reference points so that you can look at it and say, oh, I guess I'm a little proud here. I'm entering and exiting the cube at a different location, so the drawing is not symmetrical, or you break it down into smaller bits. I guess I'm hoping that makes sense. Again, some of Midweek with the Maker is just me doing things and talking. So the good news on giving myself, so hopefully it comes through, but I've got the sketch, the outline of the knife itself, and then I add a 1/4 inch on either side, gives me a 1/2 inch space to play with there. And what I want to do for this knife is, instead of a wrap construction where the leather is one piece and then folds over, I'm going to do a stack construction here, which means I'm going to have to stitch all the way around on these. So just getting that layout is going to be what we're looking to do. So these pieces will match. Next, we gotta cut this out and start transferring concepts to another piece. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to trace what I just cut out on this larger section. And this is going to give me another section. And I'm not worried that this part is, this new tracing is slightly oversized compared to the original. I'm actually quite all right with that, because we're going to end up putting this, once it's stitched together, it needs to get, the edges will need to get ground. But I can cut this and get the information I need for making the belt loop. And that will be good. And again, I can use these lines from the grid to help get a better idea of what my drawing looks like. One drawing when I do this that a line that I like to put in is here, that line. And this is just for reference for the stencil. I'm not going to worry about this later on when it comes time to cut the leather, because the leather will be straight across here. It'll go all the way. And this is this is kind of fun. This is a little ruler. Obviously it's kind of messed up, but this reminds me from when I was a kid. We had snap bracelets because we were so cool. I found this at a Habitat for Humanity restore, and it just had to come with me. This one specifically is from South Dakota. Millbank, South Dakota. So it works nicely down in my leather shop for me to keep reference of things. All right, so then we cut this out. I really hate cutting out. I always struggled. My handwriting is not the cleanest. I never learned. I did learn cursive, but I wasn't very good at it. I don't have a lot of super fine motor skills. So when I cut things out, I almost always cut them proud and come in later for that fine connection. All right. So then if I fold this back, we end up get our fancy bit. Now I could count the cubes, and I get about 2.5 inches of overlap. So this is 5 inches ish, almost 6. Is it 5? 5 3/4. It looks like 5 3/4 inches, and that will that'll work for a belt loop for a knife. So this guy would end up setting something like that. So yeah, it's a little stick out tall. I can live with that. And I can also play with it up until I cut the leather. We got a lot of room to play with. So, which is the next thing that we have to do. So we're going to transfer from the stencil to the leather and go from there. So here I've got some veg tan leather that is set out. It's a little bit on the longer side, which again I want because I want to be able to play around and see if I want to make the belt loop bigger so that I can cover more of the handle. It'll help to balance it too, because the aesthetic can slightly get off when we're doing that. So now what I need to do is transfer from the stencil to the leather and get that in a way that it can draw it out. So pencils don't really work when we want to transfer onto leather. You can, but I personally don't like it. What I always did when I was first learning anything about leather work, it was all with a pen. So I like to do my transferring with the stencil with the pen. If I can, I also like to line up one edge with a pre-cut. So then I know that one's pretty straight. And then come around and just get that. And of course the pen decides it doesn't want to cooperate as much today. And if you use thicker paper, it's easier to trace as well, but be careful with using a marker pen. Anything that will dye the leather is going to be problematic later on, because we're gonna want to dye this, and we want it to dye the color that we want rather than, you know, the black or blue of a standard marker pen. And the nice thing about a regular pen, the stencil the drawing line shows up really clearly. And by the time we finish and we bevel the edges, it will remove the ink that is on top of the leather. It's not actually penetrating deep into the leather. And so I'll just true that line up, and that'll give us a really sweet cut line, if I can follow it nicely. And then I've got extra strips which are just beautiful for later on purposes. The top part doesn't quite fit on the scrap here. It might, if I play with it long enough, I could probably get it to. This actually, it might work best for the welt layer, which is the layer in between. But we'll deal with that when we get there. Let's start by just cutting this guy out. One thing I forgot to mention was to be mindful of how you want the smooth side and the felt side. You know, do you want you need to make sure if you want the smooth side to be shown that you lay your stencil on and draw it out with that in mind. It's kind of that spatial awareness that we talk about even in forging. The same is true in leather work. And it's happened a couple times where I start making a project, a sheath, and suddenly discover, oh, I've made a sheath that goes on the wrong hand side now. So start over. Fortunately, what almost always happens is I'm trying to make a right-handed one, and I end up making a left-handed one. And since my son is left-handed, he actually has claimed one of my failed sheaths worked out well for him to make a sheath for one of his projects. Apparently my razor knife is getting dull. Which happens. Just cut that loose. I have a me project of a circle knife that me projects get pushed to the side so much. I hope someday I'll finish it. Again, proud of the line, not worried about it in the slightest, because I can actually take it over to the grinder and sand it down and it'll be just fine. And then flip it here, and you can see that handle now, or the belt loop, got much bigger. And here it actually, at that size, it matches the whole length of the handle. And aesthetically, that's a lot more pleasing than the shorter one. So I'm glad I just followed that line. That'll be good. All right. Well, you know what? That's about 20 minutes back into Midweek with a Maker. So I think I'm going to stop there. We'll continue this project, but I wanted to get this filmed and out today just to force myself back into it after a long time off. So here's the project so far. We're making our way through it. So you now get out there and make something of yourself.